Okay, I think we are live. Give me a second. Yep, we are live. Hello, everyone. This is Mani Nair from Namaste Debate. Today, I'm going to have conversation with Valerie Bradford. She is actually seeking the federal Liberal nomination for the riding of Kitchener South-Hespeler. And I just wanted to introduce you to her, and probably I will give her opportunity to speak more. Welcome to Namaste Debate, Valerie. How are you?
I'm fine, Manny. Thank you so much for having me as a guest tonight. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone in the group.
No, thank you so much for accepting my invite. I just wanted to, you can go ahead and talk all the good things about yourself.
Well, thanks, Manny. So, thank you for listening in tonight and allowing me to introduce myself. So, as Manny mentioned, I'm seeking the nomination to run for the Federal Liberal Party in the next federal election, whenever it happens, for the riding of Kitchener South-Hespeler. I've been a long time Liberal. I've volunteered at many of the festivals. Maybe I've met some of you down in Victoria Park. I love meeting voters and talking to them about politics and what matters to them. So recently, I've retired from the city of Kitchener. I spent the last 15 years working in economic development, working with the business community, helping them succeed, access government programs. I focused primarily on manufacturers. And so when I retired, I felt, we're facing this global pandemic and the ensuing recession that's happened because of it. And so the work that I've done for the last 15 years, that kind of background and training would be very valuable as we try and build back better out of this pandemic. So I thought that, the way I could continue to serve the public best would be to throw my hat in the ring and try to become the MP to represent this riding strongly in Ottawa. So that's why I'm in the race.
Okay, good. So, Valerie, I just wanted to tell everyone, whoever is watching this live, usually I have, once in a while, I usually have conversation with a lot of elected representative politicians. And after having conversation with you, I feel very strongly that you are a really good candidate. It's
Thank you.
just not about being representing Liberal Party or Conservative Party. I don't believe in that. I believe in the knowledge that elected representative bring in terms of what's going around locally and around the world. So based on that, I can tell you, like, it's been a pleasure, talking to you over the phone on various topics.
Yes, I've enjoyed our conversations too, Manny. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So way we'll do is, I just wanted to cover uh, what we have been going through for the last 1 year. So basically, we'll talk about, there'll be questions related with pandemic. We'll talk about the social media, and we will also talk about overall the federal government response to the pandemic and the vaccination. So we'll just go with the flow.
Sure.
So if you're ready, we'll
Yes,
start with my first question.
sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my first question for you is, how has pandemic impacted your life, and how have you been able to adapt and adjust to the new way of life?
Well, I think, Manny, when the global pandemic first hit, the impression was that it would impact everyone equally. I think that's what we thought. But as the pandemic progressed and rolled out, it became clear that it was impacting certain parts of our society far more greatly and did a lot more damage than others. For example, racialized communities, people living in multi-generational homes, essential workers, all those people, aged people, they've been impacted far worse than the general population and have
Mhm.
carried an unfair burden. So that was the first thing that struck me. So, from a work perspective, myself personally, I was working for the City of Kitchener in economic development, and my focus has always been on manufacturing. So, when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden we knew that there was this great shortage of domestically produced PPE, and we needed it right away. So, immediately I began reaching out to the manufacturers in the area to see who was able to shift some production capacity over to producing PPE. And we were so blessed at the companies that stepped forward, and that they might have been doing educational software, and all of a sudden they were producing facial shields, and the Canadian Shield or Barbarian Rugby was all of a sudden able to make masks, protective masks. So we were very well blessed that we had these companies. So then we prepared an inventory for what companies could produce this, and we sent that off to both the provincial and federal levels of government. So the Waterloo region really, really stepped up in the front lines. The other aspect of what we did in our department was, I'm a business development officer, and so we were reaching out to businesses. The federal government was unrolling a plethora of government programs almost on a daily basis to roll out the safety net, to support families and businesses, to keep them afloat till we could get through to the other side of the pandemic. So there was a lot of information to absorb and disseminate appropriately. I felt I was drinking from a fire hose someday. There was so much information. So we would reach out to companies and businesses to make them aware that these government programs exist, and here's how you can tap into them to get a safety net for your business. People don't access programs they're not aware of. So it was really overwhelming, and it was really stressful, of course, because of the urgency of the whole situation. But again, most people were in very urgent situations. It was an unprecedented case where people were working one day and boom, the next day, you have to stay home. You can't work. Same with businesses, you have to shut down. There was no opportunity to prepare for that, unlike other recessions that in the past we could see forward. So on a personal note, I live by myself, so I'm used to my own company, but I always got a lot of my social contact through work and through my business. I did corporate businesses with manufacturers, and I really enjoyed that aspect of my work. So all of a sudden, you couldn't do that. And you were living in Zoom meetings, and it's great, but it's really not the same. And then on a personal level, of course, like everyone, I miss my family. I miss my friends. I am in the fortunate position that I'm a proud grandmother of a brand new COVID granddaughter born a week ago, and I haven't had a chance to see her yet. I have another lovely grandson who's 2, who lives quite a ways away from here. I don't get to see him either. So it's nice to FaceTime and Zoom, but it's not the same as holding an infant or cuddling a toddler. So I can relate to probably all the sacrifices everyone else out there is making. They're personal.
No, I just wanted to congratulate for the newborn baby.
Thank you.
I think you mentioned to me your son is also he's also an elected representative, and
Yes,
if you
yes.
want to share, you're more than welcome to share
Yes.
about
So
him. Yeah.
my son, Brad Bradford, is actually the proud father of baby Briar with his wife, Catherine, and he's a Toronto councillor for Ward 19, Beaches, East York in Toronto. So he, at age 32, was successful in grabbing one of those 25 seats on Toronto Council that was cut in half prior to the last election. So that was a very intense electoral process, 11 candidates. So during that month, a couple of years ago, I became a grandmother for the first time with my daughter in Aurelia.
Mhm.
And then 2 weeks later, I joined his campaign for the last 3 weeks in Toronto. So that's how I spent my vacation 2 years ago. It was a pretty intense experience. So because of Brad's involvement with politics, I am well aware of the commitment I'm making by putting my hand forward and embarking on this. I call it Act Two, second part of my career, a way to continue the public service that I've done as a municipal public servant, but now from the political side. And I know that it's a 24/7 profession. It's relentless, but I'm prepared for it.
Mhm. So overall, like, what do you think about pandemic? Like, how the pandemic has changed your life? Like, what do you think?
Well, it certainly changed the way I worked. Now I retired at the end of the calendar year. So This has been a very busy process in seeking the nomination. I'm constantly reaching out to people in the riding to see if I can get their support.
Mhm.
So it's been very busy. The way that you would conduct a nomination process, of course, is virtual.
Mhm.
Early on, we could go door to door, but certainly not for a few months because, once we got into the red zone, you couldn't do that anymore, and certainly
Mhm.
not lockdown. So you do things more virtually and phone calls. Um, Again, it's not the way you would want to reach out to people.
Mhm.
Personal contact is definitely preferable, but you do what you do, and it's the same for all candidates.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. So my second question is, what is the worst outcome of this pandemic? We all know that there have been a lot of deaths, those kind of things. But do you also see some positive coming out of this pandemic in terms of lifestyle change, technology?
Well, I think the worst aspects certainly are the deaths and the illnesses. There's the long haulers that, even though they may have recovered, they've only partially recovered, and they're carrying forward some disabilities that no one knows how long it'll be before they clear up. The
Mm-hmm.
mental stress and the anxiety. So we can't discount that. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly the pandemic has illuminated many long-standing problems that have been in existence for decades, like in the long-term care homes that
Mm-hmm.
we chose to ignore, and now it's been proven we can't ignore those anymore. And this has also impacted women far greater than men right now. We call it the she session, very difficult to say, but because this recession, because of the nature of the work that many women were involved in, say in hospitality, their jobs have been adversely impacted. And the fact that because there's not affordable, accessible childcare, they can't get back to work if their job still exists. So they're
Mm-hmm.
still at home because their children are at home. And so this has been a problem. And these are things that we definitely need to address. So, from an economic standpoint, many jobs have been permanently eliminated. Many businesses, unfortunately, won't be coming back. The second lockdown has been really tough. They might have survived the first lockdown, but the second was just the nail in the coffin, so to speak. So we're going to have to be prepared to support these people, to help them either migrate their existing skill set into other jobs or retrain them into new jobs. And again, I'm chair of the Workforce Planning Board for
Mm-hmm.
Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin. And this is something that I've been focusing on and working on for a number of years. And we're really going to need to do that a lot as we
Mm-hmm.
open up the economy and build back better.
No, the childcare part, like the way I say is that there's different issues for different working parents. One thing I notice is, let's say if there are both the mother and father, if they both are working, there are also two classification. If they're both going to office to work, or they're working from home. If they're going to office, the childcare is a big issue, and the schools being closed, it's a bit of challenge for both working parents who have to actually go to office and work. And I personally feel that childcare has been a big issue, like in terms of the affordability of the childcare as
Yes.
well as the space. There has to be some national strategy on that. What is your take on that?
I agree completely. Canada has the most expensive childcare in the world.
Mm,
There's a reason that we have one of the lowest birth rates in the world. It's not that young people don't want to start families, they can't afford to.
right.
Our housing affordability is getting worse and worse. Kitchener Waterloo region has been impacted probably greater than many because people now that can work from home, they realize they don't have to live in a big city. They can move a little further out, have a bigger home, a bigger yard, better quality of life, and save some money. But it's pricing the affordability out of the local market. Getting back to the childcare issue, so it's not unusual in some centers to pay $1,200, $1,500 a month for an infant. That's the price of a mortgage payment. And so government has to invest in childcare. It's not an expenditure, it's an investment. For every dollar the government invests in childcare, they get $2.50 worth back into the economy.
Yeah.
So I can't think of a better investment than that. And it will allow women to participate more fully in the workforce. And we're going to need them to. If we're going to recover, and I would say we don't want to just recover, we want to be better. We don't want to just go back to the way things were before, because they weren't great for everyone. And now there's even more disparity. So it's important to allow everyone that's able to participate in the workforce. So, for example, from April to October last year, while we shed 20,000 women from the workforce, we added 64,000 men. So you can see that the disparity and the discrepancy became even worse as a result of this pandemic. So we
Hmm.
have a lot of work to do.
Okay. Uh, like we all know, a lot of people have died around the world. But I also see from this pandemic there are a lot of learning, a lot of
Yes.
things we can learn, and there are a lot of positive things. Do you want to talk about that? What's your thought on that?
Well, I think for sure we have to address how we treat our seniors in
Mhm.
long term care facilities. Quite frankly, it's been appalling what we've all witnessed. And it's appalling that some provinces haven't seemed to learn from the first round to the second round, even though we had a break in the action. We have to do better. We
Mhm.
can do better.
Mhm.
And I do think the federal government's going to have a role to play in that. If we
Mhm.
can have, say, staffing ratios for kindergarten classes, we certainly should have staffing ratios for these homes,
Mhm.
to ensure that our seniors that have worked so hard and now are in a frail condition are taken well care of. And I feel for all those who have relatives that they haven't been able to see for months and they're wondering what's going on. It became very clear during this pandemic that there were essential caregivers that were family members that were going into these long-term care homes and providing the necessary care for their parents or grandparents, like helping feed them, because the homes are so short staffed. And this is for a number of reasons. They're underpaid, their work is undervalued.
Mhm.
Very often they're working at more than one home, so they're bringing it from one home to another. There are very simple, straightforward measures that could be put in place on a national basis to ensure that we get this better. Then looking at switching over to the business side of things, we've learned that people don't necessarily have to be working in an office.
Mhm.
Many jobs can be done very effectively from home. However, once again, if we're going to do that, there has to be adequate childcare. I have experienced years ago what it was like as a single mother to be trying to work from home while you're taking care of your children, or you're studying for exams while you're taking care of your children. People working from home need adequate childcare as well, because you just can't be productive if you're taking care of toddlers or if you're homeschooling your children because the schools are shut down and you're on Zoom calls, your partner's doing the same thing. It's incredibly stressful.
Mhm. No, the use of technology has certainly, helped us a lot. Like I think without technology, this pandemic would have been totally different. Just like the early 19th century, last
Oh,
when the
for
pen.
sure. We love to hate Zoom, but seriously, it
Yeah.
does allow us to stay connected. I
Right.
don't know what we do without that technology. It's a blessing and a curse depending on what's going on,
Mhm.
right? Social media can be a curse, and yet it allows us to communicate even now when we can't get out there by any other means. It's a way of getting our messages across. So, thank goodness that we have the technology that we can do video calls like this, and we
Mhm.
can meet people and play Hollywood squares.
Mhm. No, even I feel the next election, the way the campaigning, everything will happen will be totally different.
Yes, it will. Particularly, like, I don't think, I mean, hopefully it's not going to happen until the pandemic is well under control from a health perspective and the vaccines are rolled out so that people can feel safe to be out and about. But there still will certainly be, I don't think it'll be the same as any other election campaign that we ever had for example, I've heard that Elections Canada is looking at there will be multiple polling days, so everybody doesn't have to head to the polls on the same day. So that will allow less density and more social distancing.
The one whisper I'm hearing is it all depends how the vaccination rollout goes. If it really goes well, probably the prime minister may call for an early election. If things go in a different direction, then the strategy might be different. So my next question to you is, do you think Canada is doing a good job when it comes to vaccination rollout?
Well, I think the government has done a good job in accessing as many vaccines as they can. We all know, like I have a background in financial planning,
Mhm.
and and now I've worked in the economy too. And diversification is always the key to success. The old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I think the government was very proactive in accessing a number of vaccines because nobody knew who the winners were going to be. And there's
Mhm.
still some that are under development, and some got approved quicker than others. Right now, we only have two approved. I expect before long there'll be more, and that will certainly help things. I think realistically, when you think that we had a global pandemic and we have everyone in the world wanting to get vaccinated as quickly as possible, all
Mhm.
at the same time. And right now, worldwide, there's only probably, if you count Russia and China, probably only about 6 vaccine manufacturers to serve the world's population all at once. It would be unrealistic to think there wouldn't be a few glitches in the supply rollout. And certainly that's what we've experienced is interruptions in delivery. And
Mhm.
it's frustrating. It frustrates me. It frustrates all of us. I'm sure it's only temporary. And before long, we'll have more than we know what to do with. The good news is it's given the provinces and the municipalities, the local health units, the opportunity through this pause to really ramp up and gear up so that when we do get, this wonderful supply of vaccines that is coming down the line, we'll
Mhm.
be ready to administer them very, very quickly, which is what we all want to see.
So, what's your thought on Make in Canada? I always believe, I'm a big supporter of Make in Canada. I always believe anything that we get here, especially the essential items, 60 to 80% of them should be made in Canada. What's your
Well,
general take? Yeah.
well, you're talking to someone who has spent the last 15 years supporting manufacturing. I've been the big cheerleader for local manufacturing.
Hmm.
And it's unfortunate that, we lost like laboratories and our capability to manufacture vaccines here in Canada.
Hmm.
We can see that you don't want to be held hostage and dependent on global suppliers. So
Hmm.
there's a learning there. In every crisis, there's a learning. And
Hmm.
once we get through this, there'll be lots of time to sit and see what went well and what didn't go well. But right now, we're just trying to access vaccines as quickly as it can. So I'm quite convinced that we will be ready the next time there is going to be another global pandemic. That I think we all can be sure of, but we'll be better prepared. We're already better prepared with manufacturing PPE domestically, and we will get back to producing vaccines here as well. There just wasn't time to recreate those factories by the time that we needed the rollout. So we're going to have a couple of factories by the end of this calendar year, I understand, that will be able to produce vaccines domestically. So, that could come in handy if we need booster shots or any other vaccines going forward.
Like I'm seeing that there are a lot of Make in Canada initiative, but when I look at the make, most of the makes I see they are all made in China. It's very hard to see. I haven't seen anything which is like made in Canada. I don't know. It's why is that? Maybe we are making it here, but I don't know if that is being sold around Canada or not. But I haven't
One,
seen many. Yeah.
one thing that's always been a bit of my pet peeves, America's very good about made in the USA, right?
Mhm.
I have always said that I would really, really love to see like the Canadian maple leaf or flag or something on products made in Canada, proudly made in Canada. Because from a manufacturing perspective, Canadians are recognized of making very, very high quality products. Think of Canada Goose Codes, Roots Manufacturing. We make excellent quality goods, and people are prepared to pay a premium for that because they know that they're buying quality that lasts, which from a sustainability perspective is very good. You've all heard about the disposable clothing, etc., that ends up over in the third world in their garbage dumps. How irresponsible is that, that we ship these problems off to other countries to take care of our disposal requirements. So I think sometimes the labeling isn't what it could be or should be, but I do know that even some of the locally produced PPE was donated to hospitals and to schools and things like that. So that certainly local manufacturers really, really did step up. And yes, I know sometimes on the shelf you see that it's all made in China. But I recall when this PPE was coming over, a lot of those masks were substandard and weren't usable when they got here. And that was another unfortunate thing. So what you make at home, you control at home with the Canadian standards, right?
Yep. Okay. Good. Thanks. So regarding vaccination, my question is, how confident are you with the approved vaccination and its effectiveness?
I am 100% confident. The reason being, I trust the science. So the only reason people are a bit maybe hesitant, or one of the main reasons, is because it all happened so quickly. And I mean, thank goodness it happened quickly. And we hear, oh, it could take 10 years to develop a vaccine. It does take 10 years to develop it from scratch. And this was done in 10 months. But the reason they were able to do it so successfully, so quickly, is they had already done a lot of research on how to build and construct vaccines to deal with COVID. But there are many, many different varieties of COVID, as we're finding out. There's even variants of COVID-19 now, but they already had the base in place. So all they had to come up with was to make it specific to COVID-19. So they were able to do that and do their trials and everything in 10 months. I mean, nothing short of a miracle. So, and we never expected to be able to start vaccinating people in December. So that was a bonus. So now we're getting this bit of a pause in our distribution because the factories had to be retooled and expanded because of the demand. Well, so we did more at the beginning. Now we're having a lull. We'll do more at the end. At the end, we'll all have it. And I can tell you, as soon as my turn in the queue comes up, I'll be right there. And the reason being, not only does this vaccine protect us all from a very, very deadly disease, it's deadly for many people, as we know, and not necessarily just older people. It's going to give us our lives back. It's going to allow you to hug a toddler, to hold a baby, to meet your friends, to get back to some sense of normalcy. And I can't wait.
Okay. Okay, so you have pretty good confidence, and once it's available, you're going to take it.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so now we talked about vaccination. So I just want to know, how long will it take before things go back to normal, according to you?
Well, Manny, I'm not sure things are ever going to go back to normal. They'll go back to the new normal. Like everyone's alluded to, this is unfortunately probably not going to be the last global pandemic that we experience. So we've learned a lot. I think there'll be different ways of working. I think many people will never go back to the office, or they may go back part time. Obviously, offices are not going to. The big move before was to basically cram as many employees as possible in the tiniest space possible. And people were building more and more smaller and smaller condominiums, micro condominiums, because that's what they could afford.
Mhm,
Now people value space. They don't want to be stuck in an elevator with people.
mhm,
People are already looking at transit a little bit differently too. The TTC ridership is way down from what it was before. People
Mhm.
are looking at active transportation. Cities are building cycling lanes, safe cycling infrastructure. People want that independence. I think, we're going to deal with a lot of our traffic congestion. People don't need to be spending an hour on the 401 morning and night driving into the city. They can
Mhm.
spend that time with their families. So I don't think we'll go back to the way things were. I think we'll go back better. It's going to be a gradual process. We're going to have to be extremely careful in how we come out of lockdown. It's
Mhm.
going to have to be done on a very calculated basis, looking at what's going on in individual areas. It's not a one size fits all solution.
Mhm.
And we're going to have to trust our governments to make the right decisions to make sure it goes well.
Mhm. Okay, so you think so? You're saying we'll have a new normal, not the original normal?
I don't think we're going to go back, Manny, to exactly the way things were before. And you know what? As
Mhm.
I mentioned at the outset, it wasn't all that good for a lot of people. So
Mhm.
if we can, even things up a little better and, value some of these essential workers more, realize that they are essential. They've kept food on our tables. They've
Mhm.
kept the supply chain going. These
Mhm.
are very, very valuable people and
Mhm.
doing very valuable work that,
Mhm.
we just took for granted before.
Mhm.
And yeah, so it's going to take a while before we get fully ramped up again.
Mhm.
But it looks like we're going to get our children back in school. That's a
Mhm.
start. We'll see how that goes. We all hope it's going to go well. They're going to need to have a lot more testing, I think, because
Mhm.
so many people are asymptomatic and that's how it spreads. No one
Mhm.
wants to deliberately spread this. And we're wearing masks and everything. But if we have these new variants that are much more contagious, and require even more aggressive masking, we're going to have to be very, very careful.
Yeah. But I think when things started in March, we didn't have a lot of information. But
That's right.
I think as we move forward, we have started learning a lot of things. Even the medical professionals, doctors, researchers start
Yes.
learning. And I think it's been next month. It will be almost a year when most of the countries, experience a pandemic. Right? It's been almost one
Right.
year,
Yes.
and I feel that it's time to move on, start our lives.
Right.
Some of the risks I think are more of because we are worried something will happen, and sometimes we have to take a calculated risk. I think economically, I feel things need to start moving now, right? You can't even keep people too long, even the kids at home, because now that will result in other issues like long-term mental health issues.
Yes, it's been proven that they have been adversely impacted.
Hmm.
I think they'll recover, obviously, when they do get back with their friends and their teachers. And I think there's a safe way to reopen, but I still feel that you can't flip a switch and we're going back to normal. No,
Hmm.
that's how we get into trouble again. And we do have to trust the science, and we have to look at the caseload. We can't just look at the hospitalizations because that's
Hmm.
a lagging indicator. We need to look at the leading indicator, which is the number of new cases in the community
Hmm.
and the reproductive rate.
Hmm.
We want it below one so that for every new case, you're exposing less than one other person. That's how
Hmm.
you get the curve down. But as long as our reproductive rate for the virus is greater than one, and it's still at two,
Hmm.
which is a whole lot better than when it was at six, but it's still, one person is exposing two other people, and that's how it grows. And particularly if we get these new strains that grow more rapidly in the community, we don't want to go back into a third lockdown. Many, many businesses will not be able to survive that.
Hmm. One thing I didn't dig more into it in terms of the research is, let's say if somebody has a COVID, and let's say it's an early stage of COVID, and whether the condition is serious or not. But my question, I don't know if you know anything about that, or like, let's say if somebody has a COVID and they take vaccination, what will happen? I don't think there has been much research done on that part.
No, I don't believe so either. I think what they're saying, if you have COVID, you shouldn't get vaccinated till you recovered from it. But what if you don't know that you have COVID?
Right.
Because again, many people are asymptomatic. They never develop symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I think we have had a lot more people that have had it than we know, because remember, way early on, the testing was so inadequate that
Mhm. Yeah.
it was really, really very narrow criteria that
Yeah.
allowed you to go and get tested. So many people, they didn't know for sure if they had it. It was like, I've never had anything like this before, but
Hmm.
they didn't meet the tiny criteria to get tested. So they just toughed it out and hopefully recovered. I mean, if they got very sick, they were hospitalized. But
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of people walking around that have had it, but it seems that the immunity from having it is not that long lasting. What
Hmm.
I've heard is around 6 months. But again, I'm not an expert.
Hmm.
So definitely vaccination is the key to our future and our freedom and our health.
Okay. So my last question on in the pandemic section, in the pandemic topic, is, let's say everything works perfectly fine, the vaccination is there, you get vaccinated. What would be the first thing you'd like to do once the pandemic is over?
Meet my granddaughter.
Okay.
That would be very special. Um, and meet my grandson again. So beyond those two very specific things, all the other things that everybody else is wanting to do, like right now, you meet someone on the sidewalk in your neighborhood, somebody moves to the driveway, somebody moves to the street, so that you don't pass. Wouldn't it be nice to stop and have a conversation like you used to? So
Hmm.
meeting friends, going out to a restaurant, travel. My first career was in the travel industry. I love to travel. I haven't
Hmm.
traveled for a long time and I won't be. I know that. I'm
Hmm.
not going to be one of these that sneak off on a vacation, because that's not advisable and it's
Right.
irresponsible.
Right.
So, all those things, those are the normal things that I'm looking forward to getting back to.
Hmm. So when you think you want to travel out, like what is the first thing you want to do? Oh, you said you want to meet your newborn,
Right,
child, right?
exactly. Right. I think many of us just took life for granted. You took for granted you could go to a store and shop in person. You
Hmm.
took for granted, like, there is the big work from home, but I have to say, one of the aspects of work that is really underestimated is socialization.
Hmm.
You had good relationships with your coworkers, or at least most of them, and it was nice to see them and see how they were doing and connect with them, or
Hmm.
maybe go out after work together or something like that. None of that happens. Now
Hmm.
you see them in Zoom meetings, it's an agenda. There's no chit chat about what did you do on the weekend or anything like that.
Hmm.
So, all these things that we took for granted, I think it's taught us what's important, and it's the people in our lives that are important.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, let's switch gear. My next topic is social media. Like you said before, social media is a very good tool. It's a very powerful tool. It can do a lot of good things and it can do a lot of damage, not only for individuals, and I say it could even damage the social harmony and integrity of a country. So, my question is, currently on social media, we are seeing an increase in hate messages being posted. Do you think, in the name of freedom of speech, it is acceptable or not?
Hate speech is never acceptable. We have freedom of speech, but not hate speech. I think we've all seen what hate speech can lead to, because often it leads to a call to action. We just have to look back to what happened on January the 6th, south of the border. It was horrifying to see what happened. And looking back, you could see that building over the months, over the years, and amping up people. And we have to shut that down. We cannot allow that to continue.
Mhm.
And it's a relief to me to see that the government has moved to label the Proud Boys as a terrorist group because
Mhm.
that allows us to control their activities and basically shut them down. You can't belong to them. They can't fundraise. They are a domestic terrorist group. And it's very frightening that these groups happen. And social media has allowed that to happen. And we have to be ever vigilant. We already know, like, we can't be smug here in Canada. We
Mhm.
have systemic racism here. It exists in all of our organizations.
Mhm.
We acknowledge that and we need to address that. And we have to be ever, ever vigilant. Democracy is fragile. You have to be constantly protecting and defending it. And you cannot have hate speech entering into the conversation. You have to shut it down.
Yeah. Do you have any specific opinion about Antifa? I don't know if Antifa is a group or it's just a collection of people having a common, whatever ideology. But I keep hearing about Antifa, but it's.
Again, I'm not really in a position, I don't think, to make a statement on that. But
Mhm.
I would say all hate groups, however, from whatever part of the spectrum they're originating from,
Mhm.
uh, they're all toxic and they're damaging,
Mhm.
and and we have to stop it.
Okay. Okay. So my next question on this social media part is: do you think social media platforms should be suspended 1 month before the election to reduce the impact of fake news and propaganda on voters?
I think our federal government is taking an even better approach on that,
Mhm.
because they already back in November introduced legislation to do with a digital charter, which
Mhm.
will set up parameters for social media.
Mhm.
You see, it's the job of government to protect the public. It's not
Mhm.
the job of social media companies to protect the public. They have another agenda. That's not their agenda. It was wonderful that, albeit a bit late in the game, that finally they took Donald Trump offline, but
Mhm.
it was after the horse was already stolen from the barn. It was
Mhm.
after January the 6th and that horror.
Mhm.
And I'll have to say, the silence was blissful
Mhm.
once there was no tweets coming from that source. I think
Mhm.
everyone, a collective sigh of relief. But again, it was a case that, these companies, yes, they did step up, but too little too late. So it is the government's role to come out with this digital charter. We had the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but now we're in a digital world. And now we realize the power of digital media. And that's where, unfortunately, a lot of people are getting their information and, more importantly, their misinformation, and they think it's gospel, and people are persuadable, and many people are followers, and if they're following the wrong thing, they go down the wrong path, and we see what happens. So we have to, I applaud the government for that initiative,
Mhm.
and it can't happen soon enough as far as I'm concerned.
The one concern I have with the digital charter is like who is formulating this policy. Personally feel if it's a bipartisan committee or parliamentary committee or even opposition is included, I think then it will be a fair, because what I'm hearing from the other side is then the government can pick and choose what people can say and say not, right? Because a lot of people, I when I talk to conservative, is like when they get upset, they say something, and if that is constitute that if that constitute as hate crime, then they won't be allowed to talk. So they feel it depends how the whole law, the charter will be interpreted, right?
Right. Well, with all laws, they're always open to interpretation, right?
Mhm.
I have seen the draft of the clauses, and it looked quite comprehensive to me. And
Mhm.
I personally didn't find it um, of any concern.
Mhm.
I felt it was well written. And I don't know the process of which, I don't know if it was a
Mhm.
multi parliamentary committee that, made
Mhm.
input or not. But, it'll go through the normal legislative process. It'll be debated in the House, first and second reading. It'll go to the Senate. They
Mhm.
may make some improvements. And as the current government has tried to make the Senate much less partisan ever since Trudeau has come into power. There are no political appointments. It's a
Mhm.
committee that makes recommendations for senators, and there's getting to be more and more independent senators. And if we truly want the Senate to be a chamber of sober second thought,
Mhm.
it should not be partisan at all. Partisanship happens in the House of Commons. The
Mhm.
Senate should be above that. So that's been a great accomplishment, I feel, of the current government, to try and take politics out of the Senate so that they can just look at the legislation objectively. And we have wonderful senators that come from a very diverse background with very diverse perspectives that they bring to the discussion.
Okay. The other thing a lot of people say about Senate is, Senate is always appointed by the government official. Maybe from outside they may not look partisan, but on the other side, it depends who is putting them in charge, right? So a lot of people say the Senate should be some sort of, somebody should vote for them, or the Senate should not be there. I don't know. What's your take on this?
Well, I think my understanding is it would be a great big you'd have to open up the Constitution to alter the Senate in any substantial way, or certainly to eliminate the Senate. So I think what the present government has done to try and make changes to make it more objective and less partisan was a very effective way of
Mhm.
doing that without opening up a whole constitutional debate. That's
Mhm.
my understanding, anyway.
Okay. Okay, good. So we covered that. Probably we'll cover one or two items. The one thing I want to cover is the federal, because you'll be running, if you get nominated, you'll be running as an MP. So I just want to focus my attention on the federal side.
Yes.
So, what's your take on Trudeau government so far? How would you rate them from 1 to 10? 10 means they are doing an extremely good job. And so far, what have they been able to achieve, and areas they can focus more and improve? Like the good things they have done so far and the areas they can improve. But how do you want to rate that? You can answer in the end or something.
I think every government, when it comes into power, faces challenges. It depends on the challenges of the day. So I think we need to look at the totality of what the current government has accomplished, and they've accomplished quite a few things. Um, Increasing like when they came into power back in 2015, we were headed in an area where Canada was getting more inward looking. We were reducing the number of immigrants that we were bringing in. We were pulling back on our trade arrangements. We were more inward focused. We were being less supportive and inclusive. We were being more divisive. And these are all unhealthy trends. So the Canadian public decided that they wanted to make a change, and and so the Liberals came in and they made a lot of changes. So they
Mhm.
brought in a gender neutral cabinet, for example,
Mhm.
so that Parliament would look more reflective of the people that we're representing. They increased the child tax benefit so that they uplifted many thousand more children out of poverty. Um, they, unexpectedly, when they came in, they didn't actually think they would be dealing with a President Trump and all that entailed, and have to renegotiate NAFTA, and yet they did. And that is an amazing accomplishment.
Mhm.
That dealing with that sort of an administration down there that was terribly unpredictable and very punitive to Canada, we got a pretty good trade deal out of that, better
Mhm.
than we had before, updated. I mean, we weren't looking for that, but the process was foisted on us, and I think the government did a very good job doing that. Um, I think they've done an excellent job supporting individuals, families, and businesses through this pandemic financially by rolling out supports so that people could keep themselves afloat. The government was in a strong position financially as far as our debt to GDP ratio going in, the best of the G7 and the G20. So we're in a good position to borrow as we need to, and to support people, because if we had allowed people to fail, the recovery would have been so much worse. But because they came up with very creative programs that allowed employers to stay connected to their employees, that is such a critical thing. One of the big challenges here in our region, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in Canada. Obviously, it's a lot higher now because it's higher everywhere. But one of the great challenges for our companies and businesses growing here, whether it was tech or healthcare or financial services or manufacturing, was finding an adequate supply of labor. And so, this is one of the challenges. And so if you have good workers, you don't want to lay them off. You don't want to let them go because you're not going to get them back. So when we get the go ahead to reopen, we want to get right back as quickly as we can. And you need to have your workforce in place because it's a very competitive environment. So these are all very good proactive things that the government has done. And I would be proud to run on their record.
Mhm. Okay. Like for me personally, I feel the vaccination, like you said, the government did a good job in trying to procure from different sources. I do understand and I appreciate that, but I don't know the background why you know we are not getting vaccination on the ground. I know the government has done the contract and all that, and I believe in terms of per capita, the Canadian government ordered more vaccination per person than any other country in the world.
Yes, we did. But unfortunately, now with the rollout, there have been glitches that have happened that
Hmm.
are completely out of the government's control. And it wouldn't matter who was in power right now.
Hmm.
If Pfizer or Moderna says, we're not shipping what we said we anticipated we could ship in week 8 of the rollout because we have to retool our plant and shut it down, there's really nothing we can do about that except hold them to their agreement that by the end of March, you're going to have so many million doses. That's
Hmm.
all we can do. The contract obviously was in the first quarter, you'll get this much. So again, they had anticipated the rollout, but again, we didn't anticipate that we get any till January. So they gave us some earlier than we thought we'd get. And now they've said, you're not getting any this week. So neither of those things are in the government's control because we're not in control of the production schedule. All
Hmm.
we can control is what happens to the vaccines once they arrive in Canada. And I think we've done an excellent job of getting them out to the provinces who then have, gotten them out to their clinics and into the long-term care homes. Each province has managed it differently. Maybe some have done better than others. Everything will be debated and analyzed after the fact, but certainly when we're in the throes of it, it's no time to analyze while the game is in play, so to speak.
Hmm. So let's say you want to improve something, what are those areas where you think looking back, we can always say we could have done this and that. So in that perspective, like what do you think we could do, or we could have done something different looking back, you know
Well,
yeah.
I would say governments at all levels, one of the things they always seem to struggle with is communication. And I know the provinces are saying it's hard for them to gear up because they don't know how many vaccines are coming. And I think the federal government would love to tell them how many vaccines are coming next week, if only they knew. So it's difficult to communicate what you don't know. And I think that generates a lot of frustration on the part of people. I know when I was a financial planner, one thing markets don't like and businesses don't like is uncertainty. People can always handle bad news better than wondering because you can't plan for the unknown. But unfortunately, COVID has been all about the unknown because we never dealt with a pandemic like this before. And everybody was learning as they went along about the virus, about the masking requirements, all these things. And so we've all gotten much smarter about the COVID-19 situation as we went along. And if we knew then what we know now, probably we could have handled phase one a lot better, but we
Mhm.
did not know. So all we can do is learn so that going forward, we're better prepared for next time. And I think that applies to all levels of government.
So 1 to 10, or how you want to rate? 10
Okay,
means
no,
really
I
good, right?
don't do report cards, Manny. I
Okay.
don't. No,
Okay.
I think you can't give a quantitative number. Like I think everybody would say, are there things we could have done differently? Could we
Hmm.
have done things better if we'd have known, had more information?
Hmm.
Yes, you can always second guess, but I do think everybody, even now, is doing the best they can given the situation we're in. And one of the things that has really impressed me is how, certainly in the early stages at least, everybody pulled together. And, even the opposition wasn't that critical because I think they knew we have to respond. We have to do the best we can for Canadians as quickly as we can for Canadians. And I hope that that spirit of cooperation can continue. I know everybody's patience runs thin and nerves get frazzled, but we just have to stay the course.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, probably this will be my last question, and probably I'll give you an opportunity to speak to everyone in general. My last question is, I don't want to focus on the municipal province politics, those kind of thing, but I just want to say, let's say you get nominated. What are the top things, issues you think the region is facing, and what is your ideas proposal to fix that in general?
So I think my top three issues that I think we really need to focus on are affordable, accessible childcare so that, women can get back to work. It primarily affects women. Women can get back in the workforce. I think that's pivotal, and that will be good for families, and that will be good for the economy. I think we are going to need to provide a lot of support for our workforce. The people that have lost their jobs are going to need a lot of help, and they're going to need help from all levels of government to allow them to re-equip themselves, re-educate themselves so that they can transition into the jobs that do exist and the new jobs that will be created. There'll be jobs created in the green economy. The federal Liberals have a great plan for the environment. The environment and protecting the environment is so important. And I know it matters to people. It particularly matters to our young voters. And it matters to me as a grandmother. We all have an obligation to leave this world better than we found it. And we've not done a very good job of that.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, Over the years, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And it's like a snowball rolling down the hill. And it's to the point that we've got to act very quickly now. We can't continue to put it off. And
Mhm.
then the third area is affordable housing. That was getting to be a problem here in our region before COVID, but it certainly is now. The average house price now, $850,000.
Yep.
And with the push out from the GTA because of the work from home opportunities, those people moving to our area, they're fine to buy. We're still a bargain because if they're selling for over $1 million, they can buy for 850,000 and they've still got money in the bank. It's great. But it's pricing our people out. It's pricing our children that are wanting to establish a home here where they grew up, or for the people that we're trying to attract to come here. When you're trying to attract businesses here, and that's what I used to work on, what do you think is the primary determinant in them locating in a particular place? You may know this because I think we've had this conversation before. But basically, the most important thing is the availability of the workforce they require. They can compensate for anything else. They can build the building. They can do, there's other things they consider, transportation networks, etc. But the crucial thing is the workforce. And if we want to continue to have the good workforce availability, our community has to be affordable because people won't move here for jobs if they can't afford to live here. And so those are my top priorities.
Okay.
And when I'm talking to people, and I'm hearing that from them too. They're worried about affordability and they're worried about childcare and they're worried about how am I going to get a job? My job's evaporated. what am I going to do? How am I going to provide for my family? So those are things that resonate with me.
Okay, good.
And
I
that's what I'm
personally
prepared
feel
to work hard for.
I
Pardon?
personally feel we need to have an unaffordable housing emergency declared. I don't know, because if until unless we don't declare it as a provincial or national crisis, I think the government will just, we will only get some patchworks, bits
Well,
and
I
pieces.
think
Yeah.
I think, Manny, there's widespread recognition at all levels of government and across most of the country. Maybe not in the rural areas in the smaller towns,
Mhm.
but again, it's a relative issue. They have lower incomes, so they probably have affordability issues too. But I think there's a widespread recognition that housing affordability is a challenge. And this is now when we're at historic low interest rates, and they're not anticipated to go up anytime soon. But if and when they do, if we haven't addressed the housing stock, it will be even worse. So I think this is the time to really address it, because coincidentally, the federal government at least knows that we are going to require a lot of infrastructure spending coming out of this. And infrastructure spending, whether it's on transit or housing or broadband, widespread internet, or water supplies, it requires labor, workforce. It creates jobs. And so, you're solving more than one problem. You're dealing with the affordability housing and the lack of housing stock, and you're creating jobs. So I think now is the time, and now is definitely the need, and we can't afford not to address it. It has to be now.
Okay, good. I think that's all. That's all I have from my end, and I just want to say thanks to you. Really appreciate your time and accepting my invite. I just wanted to give you one last opportunity for you to talk to everyone, and
Well,
I know
thanks,
you're going
Manny.
through the nomination, right? So,
Right. Well, thank you so much, Manny, for giving me this opportunity. It's always great to chat with you. And I was
thank you.
thrilled when you offered me the opportunity to reach out to the group as well, to explain what about, why I'm running, and why I think I could bring good, strong representation to Ottawa on behalf of the riding of Kitchener South-Hespeler. So if you do live in the riding of Kitchener South-Hespeler and you want to participate in the nomination process, and I sincerely hope you do, because I think it's very important that everyone get engaged in politics, and because we've seen what happens when, like down south, some people sat out an election last time and they didn't vote, and look what happened. They may not have been happy with the decision of Donald Trump, but they had to deal with him for 4 years. And notice how outstanding the voter turnout was. So the nomination process is step one in selecting an MP. So it's purely a numbers game. Whichever contestant gets the most votes will become the candidate for the Liberals in the next federal election. So I really hope that you would consider supporting me. I would invite you to visit my website, valeriebradford.ca, and you can learn all about me, the things I stand for, the things I believe in. And if you're comfortable, then you can sign up to support. Uh, Obviously, it's free to belong to the Liberal Party. So the only people that get to vote in a nomination are registered Liberals living in Kitchener South-Hespeler. So I hope you'll do that. And it would be my honor and privilege to represent you in Ottawa.
okay. Thank you so much, Valerie. I
Thank
wish
you.
you my best wishes are with you. Like I said, I haven't spoken to any other nomination candidate, but based on my conversation, you're really good. You have subject matter expertise in a lot of fields.
Right.
That's what I look for in an elected representative. And you're also aware about the issues, and you also have an idea of what the solutions are, and that's what I always look for. So I wish you all the very best.
Thank you. And I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. So please follow me. Please converse with me. I welcome your input and conversation anytime. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We'll
Thank
talk to
you.
you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.